Let's start off with something as simple as sprinting. It exists, and you should use it. During launch, we watched a number of streamers just completely disregard this ability, even though a tooltip lets players know it's a thing within the first 10 minutes of the game. That being said, sprinting is an essential aspect of movement in the game. All you need to do is hold down your dodge button. That opens up exploration even more, and considering how monumental jumping is in this title, also knowing how to sprint becomes even more important. Another easy to miss tip has to do with your most prized possession, your flasks. This is quite literally your lifeblood within the game, and the item that will propel you forward as you learn to tackle the challenges of the lands between. You already know that your flask fills up when resting at a site of lost grace, but did you know that both of your flasks restore 3 charges after clearing out a group of enemies in an encounter area? This is a change in line with the open world nature of the game, and it's important to keep in mind as it can influence your entire approach to Elden Ring. Because resting at a site of lost grace resets the world, it might be better to take on that added risk of clearing out an enemy encampment, because you know on the other side your flask will fill up, and the enemies that you killed will still stay dead. FromSoft loves their secrets, and they love putting those secrets just out of reach. That's what we're talking about here with the Teardrop Scarabs. These buggers are elusive creatures that you'll find all over the world. They'll come in different varieties, and their only goal is to make sure you don't catch them. When you see a scarab, you need to act quickly and try and kill it before it disappears. Killing a red scarab will restore 3 charges to your flask of Crimson Tears. Killing a blue scarab will restore 3 charges to your flask of Cerulean Tears. And most important of all, killing a silver scarab will reward you with a new Ash of War, or sometimes even a sorcery. Talk about an impressive prize for little effort. Anytime you see a scarab, you should life as quick as possible, as they don't stick around for long. Of course, you can reset the world, resting to reset their spawn, so if you missed them the first time around, don't worry, they'll be back.
Today we honor the fur of advanced against the legions of Cyril.
Woohoo! Oh yeah, party!
This war is far from over, and we shall need your sword.
Oh, and mine, I've got a sword.
Shut up.
It's gonna be awesome.
Stop it.
Elden Ring is a loot-driven game, and you'll pick up plenty of baubles and trinkets during your time in the lands between. One quality of life tip we know you're going to love has to do with your equipment slots. Cycling through one click at a time just isn't efficient, and as your bags become more full with gear, things can get lost in the shuffle, literally. A better solution is to prime the items you know you're going to need and put them in the first slot. That's because when you hold down the corresponding button, the item in the first slot will quickly cycle to the first position. This is a great way to access things like key spells and flasks when under pressure, and a tip that will no doubt save your life in a pinch. Catch them. When you see a scarab, you need to act quickly and try and kill it before it disappears. Killing a red scarab will restore 3 charges to your flask of Crimson Tears. Killing a blue scarab will restore 3 charges to your flask of Cerulean Tears. And most important of all, killing a silver scarab will reward you with a new Ash of War, or sometimes even a sorcery. Talk about an impressive prize for little effort. Anytime you see a scarab, you should beeline it and end their life as quick as possible, as they don't stick around for long. Of course, you can reset the world, resting to reset their spawn, so if you missed them the first time around, don't worry, they'll be back. Elden Ring is a loot-driven game, and you'll pick up plenty of baubles and trinkets during your time in the lands between. One quality of life tip we know you're going to love has to do with your equipment slots. Cycling through one click at a time just isn't efficient, and as your bags become more full with gear, things can get lost in the shuffle, literally. A better solution is to prime the items you know you're going to need and put them in the first slot. That's because when you hold down the corresponding button, the item in the first slot will quickly cycle to the first position. This is a great way to access things like key spells and flasks when under pressure, and a tip that will no doubt save your life in a pinch. Simple yet oh so important. We're talking about ladders, the bane of any Souls player's existence. You go up them, you go down them, but are you doing it the right way? In all seriousness, there's a few things you need to know to really be efficient when climbing. First, if you hold down the dodge key while moving up the ladder, you'll climb faster. In the same vein, holding the dodge button while moving down the ladder allows you to slide down it quickly. If you want to dismount from the ladder, simply double tap your dodge button. If you want to attack on the ladder, you can do that too. R1 will attack above and R2 will attack below. Finally, it's worth pointing out that you can use your flask while mounted on a ladder. When you start Elden Ring, the map will be pretty much barren, and we get it, you don't want a guide to walk you through how to find each piece or you'd be watching that video. We're just going to help nudge you in the right direction. If you're looking to fill the entire map, simply start by exploring the world. Eventually, through the fog of war, you'll notice a glowing mapstone icon. Simply head there and pick up the fragment, but be warned, the amount of enemies lurking nearby is substantial. We all know how much FromSoft likes a good old ambush, so bring a big stick and get ready to fight for the fragment. Who are we kidding? Sometimes digging around your inventory, wading through walls of text can suck the fun right out of a great game. On the flip side, not enough information can be equally annoying. Elden Ring gives you what you need at a glance, but you can actually dive deeper into the menus if you so choose. Switch Display Mid is invaluable for seeing intricate details about key items, sorceries, weapons, and more. It even tells you what items will be unlocked when you give it to a specific vendor. In a similar vein, the Help button can be used on your stats screen to tell you exactly what each one of your stats does and why you'd want to invest in each of them. It's more information than we've ever received in a Souls game, and honestly, it makes building out a character that much more enjoyable. Sometimes, combat comes fast and furious, and you don't want to stop and check every body along the way for your next piece of loot. That'll most likely end with you being dead. Luckily, FromSoft thought of this, and there's a subtle animation that actually alerts players when loot is about to drop. When killing enemies, look for a burst of white that explodes out from their body. This is a sign that, hey, something good is about to drop, so don't run off. It's an unobtrusive way to let players know what's going on while still not getting in the way of the action. Now, we couldn't do a tips and tricks video without talking about combat, and when it comes to mastering the mechanics of the game, you know I had to ask Livid his best advice. As someone that's been playing Souls games for over a decade, he's been guiding me in my journey through the series, and it's kind of culminating with Elden Ring. That being said, he wanted me to share some of his best tips for taking on the combat within the game. If you don't meet a specific stat requirement for a weapon, try two-handing it. This may boost your stats enough to use that weapon in that manner. For those that don't know, whatever button you use to cycle your D-pad menu needs to be pressed in conjunction with your light attack of your respective weapon, either main hand or offhand. This will put your other weapon away and let you two-hand it. If you are brand new to the genre or just starting out with Elden Ring, you may not know that most weapons have special abilities or can be assigned them via the Ashes of War system. When wielding different weapons, you can't use these abilities by default. You need to two-hand your weapon to allow your heavy attack button for your offhand weapon to enable these. You can bypass this system by obtaining the No Skill Ash of War and slapping it on your offhand weapon or shield. This will allow you to use your main hand's ability or Ash of War while dual wielding, which is combat. And when it comes to mastering the mechanics of the game, you know I had to ask Livid his best advice. As someone that's been playing Souls games for over a decade, he's been guiding me in my journey through the series, and it's kind of culminating with Elden Ring. That being said, he wanted me to share some of his best tips for taking on the combat within the game. If you don't meet a specific stat requirement for a weapon, try two-handing it. This may boost your stats enough to use that weapon in that manner. For those that don't know, whatever button you use to cycle your D-pad menu needs to be pressed in conjunction with your light attack of your respective weapon, either main hand or offhand. This will put your other weapon away and let you two-hand it. If you are brand new to the genre or just starting out with Elden Ring, you may not know that most weapons have special abilities or can be assigned them via the Ashes of War system. When dual-wielding different weapons, you can't use these abilities by default. You need to two-hand your weapon to allow your heavy attack button for your offhand weapon to enable these. You can bypass this system by obtaining the No Skill Ash of War and slapping it on your offhand weapon or shield. This will allow you to use your main hand's ability or Ash of War while dual wielding, which is especially useful to mages and shield users alike. You can buy this from Warwick, a merchant in the shack to the east of Stormdale Castle. Fighting an armored enemy? Try switching to a blunt-style weapon and watch as your attacks won't bounce off them anymore and will deal substantially more damage. Of course, you should always be 100% investing in multiple types of weapons in these games. Alright, so how about shielded enemies? If you D-pad over to unequip your weapon, you'll enter an unarmed state, which will allow you to kick staggering shielded enemies. If you swap quickly back to your main hand weapon, you can chain that to a frontal stab, dealing high damage and often knocking them down. In the same vein, if you weren't aware, you can utilize sneaking and backstabs a huge percentage of the time to make encounters much easier for yourself. If you don't know how to backstab, simply sneak up to an enemy and when directly behind them, hold your light attack button. A quick note about dodging, you can also jump. It's a new mechanic and you should use it to avoid low sweeping attacks. You can also tap your dodge key to do a quick backstep instead of a full dodge roll. Additionally, if you tap this button and then quickly press your thumbstick in a different direction, you can sidestep as well. Crafting is new. It's exciting, but it's not entirely clear. Just so we're all on the same page here, cracked pots are not consumed when used during crafting. Think of these like flasks. They can hold one thing at a time, but once you throw the item, the charge is consumed, but the cracked pot remains. This means the more cracked pots you find, the more throwable items you have access to at any one time. Not only is Torrent great for getting around, but he's also immune to hazardous effects. Convenient if you need to get through a zone that would otherwise poison or rot you. Just summon your trusty steed and he'll carry you through the dangers without so much as a scratch. Additionally, for all our new Souls players out there, if you're ever in a scenario where you have to walk through one of these zones, never roll. By rolling, more of your body with the hazard, which means faster buildup and quicker dead you. We've known since like the second trailer that Torrent has the ability to jump into the air at a remarkable height, but I bet a bunch of you didn't know that those spirit springs found throughout the world also work the other way around. If you're ever in a scenario where you need to jump down but don't want to die in the process, look for those very same spirit springs. Think of them like targets and try and land as close to them as possible because they'll completely negate your fall damage. The AoE is actually pretty forgiving, so as long as you're in the ballpark, you're good. This gives you a bit more flexibility when running around the world, and it's a great piece of knowledge to squirrel away in the back of your brain because you know when that info may come in handy.
Albion Online is a sandbox MMORPG in which you write your own story instead of following a laid-out path. Explore a vast open world. Everything you do has an impact on Albion's player-driven economy. Every piece of equipment is crafted by players from resources gathered by players. The equipment you wear defines who you are. Switching from knight to magician is as easy as swapping your armor and weapon, or be a combination of the two. Venture deep inside dungeons and discover wealth and danger in equal measure. Relax by retreating to your personal island, where you can build a home, grow crops, and raise animals. Grab a fishing pole and head for Albion's rivers, lakes, and oceans. Join a guild, play together, take part in massive player versus player battles, and claim your piece of the world. This is Albion Online.
Speaking of jumping off high places, let's talk about those tombstone platforms you see all over the side of cliffs. They're actually there for good reason. These are specifically placed elements in the world that help you descend from certain locations. Don't attempt to navigate these on foot. They're really designed for mounted traversal, as the gaps can be a bit unpredictable, and Torrent's double jump is really necessary to use these effectively. If you want even more control over the process, you can use the telescope item. This will allow you to rotate Torrent, lining up a perfect jump. Is it a bit extra? Absolutely, but it's better than dying. Also, fun fact, if you zoom in close to your map, you can see these rendered out in tiny detail, taking most of the guesswork away and giving you a surefire way to identify these helpful outcroppings. Final tip about jumping and falling, I promise. This is one that most veteran Souls players will know. But if you ever want to test if a fall will kill you, toss a rainbow stone off the ledge. If it shatters upon impact, then the fall will definitely kill you. If the stone hits the ground and doesn't shatter, well then friends, happy trails, because the fall definitely won't kill you. We hope. Just when you thought we were done talking about Torrent, bam, we hit you with a load of mounted combat tips. Look, we get it. People want to fight on horseback, but is it the most engaging way to play a Souls game? I'll let you decide. That being said, there's still some important things you need to know. First, holding your strong attack button while riding will extend your weapon out alongside you, actively hurting any enemies you touch during that time. This can be super useful if you want to chain stun a particular enemy or deal with a large group as you pass by them. You can also attack on both the left and right of your horse while mounted with your currently equipped weapons by using the respective inputs for both the heavy and light attacks on both your left and right hand weapons. Another bonus tip, say you don't want to use your right-handed weapon while mounted. Well, how the hell do you use your left-handed weapon? Simply use your command to two-hand your weapon to switch to your offhand weapon. This is especially useful if you want to swap from melee combat to either ranged or magic-based combat, all with the click of a button. Alright, we're done with the mount, I swear. We're changing gears here and talking about the enemies themselves. Did you know that certain enemies in the world, if you're lucky enough, will have glowing eyes? These should never be overlooked, as killing one of these illuminated foes will reward you with 4 times the runes. You heard me right. Just keep in mind that these enemies are random and reset when you rest at a site of lost grace or die, so you really have to keep your eyes open if you want to spot them. See what I did there? While exploring the world, you'll also occasionally run across these slightly glowing skulls, just chilling in all manner of places. These are actually destructible and will reward you with an item that, when used, awards 200 runes. It's not a crazy amount, but hey, if it takes all of 2 seconds to destroy and you bank up a bunch of these, especially if you run over them with Torrent, you might make yourself a tidy profit. These skulls are all over the world, so again, keep your head on a swivel. If you're a veteran Souls player, then you might already know this, but for those of you coming into the genre fresh, did you know you can hit the fire pillar traps in dungeons with a ranged or melee attack and make them retract back into the ground? You can also make them rise back up by doing the same thing, which can be useful if you need a lift to a place enemies can't reach you, or if you want to use those traps to kill enemies that you aggroed into the room. If you've watched any of our boss guide videos, you might have picked up on this next tip. Certain talismans, specifically the defensive ones, can be upgraded. It's not a matter of going to a blacksmith, but rather finding a duplicate copy of the talisman in the world. Every time you get the same talisman, it amplifies its effect, and this is important because some of the most challenging fights in the game almost demand that you think about your defenses, not just from a combat sense, but from a gearing sense as well. Don't worry, this won't mess up your fashion souls, but it will save your life. Finally, let's talk about stone sword keys. You might already know what these are, but in case you're new around here, let's just lay it all out there. Stone sword keys can be found all over the lands between, and they're your ticket to unlocking stone sword fog walls. Behind these are some of the best and most valuable items in the game, but be warned, this is not simply open the wall, claim a prize. No, in typical FromSoft fashion, unlocking the wall is just the first step to claiming your reward. The best advice we have
Weren't you? Well, you're back. Care to buy something? I am of a nomadic people, selling wares as I travel. The land has been tainted by madness since the shattering of the Elden Ring. It's only tarnished like yourself, who keep things from drying up entirely. Let's say you're a very welcome customer. Goodbye for now. What is it? Still going to purchase something? Goodbye. Nice to do business.